Good afternoon. I'm Dana Bezerra, the president of the Heron Foundation. It's my pleasure to join you for this virtual summit. I look forward to a time when we can all be in person again. I'm grateful to Phenix for the opportunity today to discuss a topic that Heron has long grappled with, aligning 100% of our portfolio for mission. For those who are unfamiliar with Heron, we are a US-based private foundation by legal structure. And what that means is that when we were created in the early 1990s, we were created with a single slug of capital. So we are not a fundraising entity. And although there are several, our primary regulatory concern is that we're obligated every year to put 5% of our capital in service to mission. Almost since the very beginning, our board thought this was the stupidest business model on the face of the planet. They didn't understand why a mission-led organization would only be required to put 5% of its assets in service to mission. So in the early years, when we were learning what it is to be a private foundation and frankly, to have a conventionally run portfolio, and then to be using approximately 5% for mission, our board found themselves spending like 2/3 of their time together during board meetings discussing the investment returns of the foundation. And our board very quickly grew frustrated. And our then chairman literally had a moment where he pounded on the table and he said, shouldn't we be more than a private investment company that uses its excess cash flow for good? That quote really became a rallying cry for the Heron Foundation. From that point forward, we've spent the last 25 to 30 years working to align our endowment with our mission. At Heron, our mission is helping people and communities to help themselves. So at the beginning, when we first decided, yep, not 5%, but 100% of our assets needed to be in service to mission, we did what we knew to do. We went out into the market and we started looking for managers who aligned with our mission and really creating and or putting in the endowment very specific direct deals that were mission aligned. The problem, as you all know, I'm sure, is that this can be a very time intensive, expensive and opportunistic way to build a portfolio. And over about Heron's first 20 years or so, we actually did get to about 40% of our endowment invested for mission. However, when 2008, 2009 happened, the timing felt urgent for us. We were in a great recession. There was lots of job loss, people were suffering. And for Heron, we turned internal and said, we need to accelerate this process for us. And really in our first 20 years or so, we've been an asset building funder. We've been focused on things like home ownership, access to capital, small business development, et cetera. But what we were learning during the Great Recession was that assets were falling apart really quickly, particularly for low-income people when there wasn't an income in the house. So we decided that we wanted to get to 100% of our endowment invested for mission by December 2017. Honestly, I can't tell you why we picked that date, but that's the date we picked. So we knew we had to move fast and decisively if we wanted to make our goal. And we decided, since assets were falling apart, and I'm being a little bit flipped to tell the story quickly, but we decided that if assets were falling apart, we really wanted to make sure households had an income. That in theory, again, telling it quickly, if there was an income in a household, people were more likely to be able to stay out of poverty or to move out of poverty. So we decided to isolate on job creation and income. And for us, as an investor, we wanted to focus on companies or enterprises that had a high head count per dollar of revenue. That was the metric, if you will, that we were looking for. And rather than continue to add positions to the portfolio, we decided that, look, 40% is aligned for mission, but 60% is really pretty conventionally invested. And it's conventionally allocated, which to us meant it was unexamined for impact or for mission. So we decided to launch what we internally call PEP, the portfolio examination process. The goal was to examine that other 60% and to look for positions that had high head count per dollar of revenue as a directional. So we knew what types of investments we were looking for. We, not kidding, hauled into Bloomberg machines, we learned how to use them, and we started torturing the positions in our portfolio to try and understand the relationship between headcount and revenue. And we paid some consultants to do this alongside us, to do it independently. We had lots of people working on this challenge. And at the end of a period of time, we all ended up with, frankly, the same result: private prisons. As you might imagine, as a poverty fighting organization, having all the data point to our perfect investment as private prisons was not a good day at the Heron Foundation. There was no way that that could be the answer we were looking for. So we decided really to deconstruct the experience. And we started asking each other, like, what just happened? How did we end up in this place? And we learned a lot of things from that deconstruction. We learned, number one, and this isn't news to most of you, the data environment is terrible. There's either too much random data or not enough data on the types of things that we cared a lot about. And we also learned, by the way, looking at all these positions, that all investing is impact investing. That every single position we looked at was having an impact of some variety on people, place, and planet. The reality is, frankly, the arrogance of our sector only talks about impact investing when we really like the impact it's having. So that was a bit of a humbling moment for Heron. And we learned that by isolating on high head count per dollar of revenue, we had focused too narrowly on the impact we sought. And instead, we're making all these trade-offs that were never really called to our attention. We were just implicitly not looking. We were making decisions by not looking at all the other data. So we decided we really needed to pull back and broaden that aperture. We realized that all enterprises consume things and emit things. And we started, like, not kidding, we painted the entire conference room in our office with whiteboard paint, and we started just whiteboarding on the walls. What do things consume? What do they emit? And we arrived at things like enterprises, companies, they consume labor, they consume water, they consume clean air. They also emit things. They emit pollution, but they also emit wages and taxes. And so how did we think about this? And just as an organizing principle, honestly, to get our arms around it in the beginning, we started organizing them into buckets. We called them capital. Human capital, natural capital, civic capital, and financial capital. And the things that were bucketed in human capital were things that the enterprise had a direct interaction with. So individual people with whom they had a direct relationship, employees, for example, suppliers. Natural capital were things where the enterprise had a direct effect on resources such as energy, raw materials, and how they handled waste products, for example, and what their effect was on the natural environment. Civic capital really looked at interactions with communities or customers or neighbors or governmental entities such as like regulators for their sector. And financial capital looked at an enterprise or a company's interaction with economic and the financial landscape in which they operate. So how do they interact with their capital providers, and how do they think about their capital outlay discussions? And really, it was just an organizing mechanism. We never set out to build a framework. But for us, as we started looking at these buckets, each capital, human, natural, civic, financial, started to be underlined by indicators. We started to say, in human capital, what do we care about? And then each indicator, what things we cared about, started to be underlined by metrics. What's measurable? What's knowable about that? And so unsurprisingly, as we started doing this across multiple enterprises, not every company, in fact, very few companies score well across all of these metrics. But the framework did allow us to ask, okay, a company scores well, it scores not so well, but on net across all four buckets, is this enterprise a net contributor to society's wherewithal, or is it a net detractor or extractive entity? And for us, we really decided we needed to sit with that data and understand the total effect of a company insofar as it was knowable before we had the right to overemphasize, in Heron's case, human capital and civic capital, because those best aligned with our mission. And we learned that the framework rarely provides great answers, but it always provided us the opportunity to ask better questions. So I say framework loosely. It's not what we set out to build. It's what we have. It's how we operate today. And we did eventually get there, but I want to be very, very clear about where we got to. When we set out to invest 100%, we said we were going to invest 100% for mission. Again, Heron's mission, helping people and communities help themselves. But where we got to is 100% invested for impact. Insofar impact is knowable, that let us sleep at night. That's a very different place than where we said we wanted to be. And even though I jest a little bit about our journey, we think it's a very important place to be. We actually would like to see more asset owners and asset allocators join us here. But to be clear, 100% invested for impact is a world apart from 100% invested for mission. And it really will be at Heron, our life's work to optimize, stealing a financial term, to optimize the portfolio from invested for impact to invested for mission. And if there's one thing we've learned for sure at Heron, it's that we don't have all the answers. We're unlikely to ever have all the answers. I doubt that we will ever do this perfectly. There's no doubt we're going to stub our toes along the way. And I'm equally sure that we'll continue to share those missteps, to write about them, to talk about them, to solicit the input of others, and to continue to tell the stories of those that inspire us or drive us forward as we go. And finally, I think we really do, as a mission-led asset allocator, believe that with perseverance and courage of our convictions, buoyed by really a deep belief in the capacity of the people and places we champion, that we can be the change that we seek, and that ultimately our reality, the reality in which we live, will reflect that. Thank you.